Get ready for a bit of spring screaming because it's not just any book club month, but it's not Halloween. It's definitely not October. It's definitely not fall because it's spring.
Yeah, welcome to Not Just Any Book Club Spring Screams edition. um, where we're going to be talking some horror authors. I believe we picked two who are not really all that related. I picked one Thomas Ligotti. He's a short story horror writer who wrote a lot of nihilistic work, some abstract horror, some gothic style. He wrote a bunch of different stuff.
And I read The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson, who has written many things that are in the horror genre. Most famously, I don't even know if this is considered horror. I'm doing some air quotes right here, but The Lottery, which is a famous short story, probably her most well-known thing aside from this book. So there's also a bit of that.
Yeah, humans were the real horror all along.
Haven't heard that one before. I guess, if you want me to start first, I will. Should I take it away?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So The Haunting of Hill House is essentially just it's probably the most famous haunted house book that there is. And it's had a very big influence on the genre as a whole. This is probably considered the most famous ghost story, but it's written in the 20th century. It was popular. It is good, but it's one of those things that I just kind of I'm content with reading. So basically, this book is about a paranormal investigator named Dr. Montague, who invites several other people to join him in Hill House, which is supposedly a haunted place because everyone that stays there essentially just gets driven insane. They suppose it's haunted. This house has a really tragic backstory about the owner, who's faced many deaths, and it's rumored to be haunted. It's very remote. The main character, well, really, quote unquote, the kind of the protagonist who we see all these points of view from, these events from her point of view, is essentially just kind of just a shy, naive woman, who, when she ventures into this town, she asks where to go, but she kind of is obtuse about it. She knows not to even mention the Hill House because it's kind of a taboo subject. And upon meeting there, she also meets the two other recipients of Dr. Montague's investigation, Theodora, and also Luke Sanderson is there. So Theodora is just this hippie, and Luke Sanderson is the relative of who ever owns the house. So he's just kind of there along for the ride. And what really kind of struck me was the fact that this book is really casual at the first half, at least. You expect something to be a little bit more sinister, scary, or even some sinister undertones, but part of me was really surprised with how much joking there was. And this book is legitimately funny, like intentionally so. It's building rapport among the characters, and it is kind of a character study as well. There's a bit of an underlying tragedy towards the entire thing, which is why Shirley Jackson kind of wrote this, because I forgot which character, but one of the characters is assumed to be gay, and which by the time this was released, I think, 1959, which is just hugely progressive at the time, because this was probably a very taboo thing. And I'm surprised that this book was not like outright banned because there was a lot of queer subtext around the character of Theo or Theodora. She goes by Theo in the book, because Theo essentially wants to go to this house because she had a bit of a spat with her previous housemate or roommate, who is not the gender is not specified, so it's kind of assumed and safe to assume that she was just living with another woman. And Eleanor and Theodora, they get closely linked together. They become very much attached, and they are almost attached at the hip. They become very attached to each other, maybe a bit annoyingly so, but they're always seen together. They always talk and they always joke, and they kind of just leave Luke off to the side. They kind of barely even interact with him. Uh, I mean, it was a very welcome thing, and I'm surprised it was handled this obviously just like the most obvious thing. Um, it was very nice, but I don't know. I really vibe with the first half of this book. And it's kind of a shame because the second half of this book, where the horror quote unquote really hits, is kind of a letdown. And I don't think it's an age thing because this book is still very well regarded by even people today that still get a little bit scared reading it. But the thing about it is the fact that it plays it to be like ambiguous, whether it could be in the characters' minds or it could be real. And to kind of just say, hey, the ambiguity doesn't work for me. And to really date myself, there's this really old movie called Anatomy of a Fall that was released in 2023, uh, where it tries to do like both sides. She's been guilty, or she's guilty of this crime, or she's innocent of this crime, and by playing both sides, it kind of distracts from the core of the narrative, and it's no different from here, because initially when the spooky stuff started happening, I'm like, oh, okay, it's so obviously ghosts because there's no way that they all have this collective hallucination about this weird cold chill around them because like you legit can't hallucinate that at all at the same time. But then it goes back on that by like having things that were there that are not there, things that only one character can see, and it flip flops on this so often that I'm just like, what's the point? I'm not really scared about of this. So I don't know. For me, I wanted to commit. Um, and there's no way of rationalizing it. And the book spends so much time trying to rationalize it rather than deliver more on the scare factor. I just wasn't feeling the threat of the quote unquote ghosts that are in the house. It really didn't work for me. And if they wanted to commit, I feel like it would have really benefited from it. Like if it went full on Poe or Algernon Blackwood, where the characters are just like fully insane, and seeing them degrade is part of the horror. I mean, you do get to see that arc of Eleanor and Theo just like slowly just losing it, but it doesn't do it well enough. It does it from the third person limited, which kind of stymies a bit of the horror because like if it was in first person, you would have really felt it, but it only gets to the thoughts just tangibly enough where you kind of understand where it's going, but you don't really feel the impact. Um, so I don't know. And they also said this quote from Shakespeare so many times: "Journeys end in lovers meeting." That I'm assuming is supposed to be like this thing where, as long as they keep saying it over and over again, it's gonna have a different meaning by the end. It just got really annoying towards me. I don't know. I mean, the ending is cool. I could see and I could still appreciate the influence it had the genre and the fact that it is still a good book if you approach it from a different perspective. But I just kind of found it a little bit underwhelming. It's just not for me.
Have you
So
seen the limited series?
I wanted to, but didn't have enough time. But I heard it's pretty different from it, and I think it
It
may amp up
it
the horror.
sounds extremely different, and yeah, it probably does amp up the horror quite a bit. Um, it's been a long time since I watched it, but from what the main scenes I remember, there's a scene of them like fighting at like a funeral procession where just
Yeah,
the
that does not
three of
happen.
them showed up. Um, yeah. Again, it's been a long time since I've seen it, but I definitely remember it being different from how you described, which I think it could be interesting to compare,
Yeah.
considering how big that was for a while, kind of faded into the background over time, but I remember a lot of people were talking about it when it came out.
Huh. Yeah. Well, really wish I had something to compare it to. Um, I'm guessing it's still pretty good, I guess. But it's one of those classics that you watch, you can see and appreciate it, but it's just not something for me.
Mhm,
Sorry.
mhm. Well, I'll tell you what, I had
Oh,
a much different experience with Thomas Ligotti. I think I have found, well, found.
Oh.
I have personally discovered, obviously not discovered for the wider world, but I've personally
Hmm.
discovered, I think, the fourth head on horror's Mount Rushmore. Um, it is like, okay, I've always talked about the big three, and I don't personally care for all of them, but Poe, Lovecraft, Stephen King.
He
Um,
says Stephen King in a very dismissive tone.
I don't view Stephen King as I don't know. I don't love what I've read of King, but I you can't deny Poe, Lovecraft, King in terms of influence and reach and all that. And Ligotti, though I don't know if he has quite reached the heights of influence and reach of those other three, I think that he should, and I think that he will over time.
Ooh.
You'll notice that only one of those three were really popular in their lifetime. Really got to see the legacy of their work. And well, Thomas Ligotti is still alive.
Oh.
So
Uh,
he's old, but he's still kicking. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, as of recording this podcast.
knocking
Um,
on wood right now.
yeah. Um, he is possibly better known for his nonfiction work at this point. Um, or if not better known, at least equally known. He wrote a book called The Conspiracy Against the Human Race, which I won't go into because I haven't read it, although I might at some point. It is nihilism, essentially. He's a nihilist. Um, and you can feel that kind of seep into his fiction and his writing because it's just his worldview. I believe I read somewhere that he either said or wrote that the scariest thing is that we talk and worry ourselves about the supernatural and the things hiding in the dark and the things behind our very reality. Um, and the scariest thing of all is that none of it is actually there, and we sit here with ourselves. I'm
Mhm.
I'm I'm extending it, but like we sit here with ourselves, and there's nothing. Um, and to a certain extent, I think that this seeps into his work because he fills that nothingness. In some cases, he leaves it there, right? But in other cases, he fills that nothingness with like a how do I put this? With a extremely drawn out and mystified version of a very real fear or event or trauma.
Mhm.
And so, for example, I saw part of the reason I was drawn to him is because he often gets compared to Lovecraft and to Kafka, actually. Um, for some, I got the Kafka a little bit, but what I will say, as an example of what I said before, and also something Kafka-esque from him, one of his short stories, "The Night School." Uh, this student, I believe it's been a while since I've read since I've read a lot of these. So excuse me if I get some details wrong. I'm gonna try and get the broad strokes right. Um, there's basically a guy, and he's involved in the university system, and he gets lost in the bureaucracy of it all and the people around him. And from what I recall, it's the focus of the story is almost like a fear of not living up to your potential, to not taking advantage of all of the opportunities you've been given to a very literal extent. He kind of becomes um nothing in a way. again, apologies, I have not read these in quite some time. Anyways, that one really reminded me of his of Kafka. Definitely some Kafka influence in there.
Yeah, but they said bureaucracy. I'm like, all right, he's about to say it.
The university system for sure. There's the shadow of another world. I wrote down a quote here. The house is an abomination, a vacuum and a void. Nothing must stand against. There's this guy. He's researching some otherworldly stuff, some otherworldly things, some spooky things. And as he is walking the narrator through this house, a powerful presence appears and takes him over. The narrator flees, and this presence takes over the house. And I wrote down a question here: either meaninglessness easily takes over, or it is easily taken over? Question mark. And these are a lot of his like more supernatural stories. The Sect of the Idiot is very much a reference to Azathoth, the idiot god, Lovecraft's creation. There's a story where he heavily leans into the idea of like crazy people in an asylum, and he takes the human fear of knowledge, anti-intellectualism, and he puts that into the people in the asylum. So these people, he leans into the idea that kind of Lovecraftian idea, I would say, that crazy people are not crazy. They have been bestowed with a knowledge beyond our understanding. They know things that we could not possibly understand, and that our fear of knowledge is derived from that idea that there are things that are kind of beyond us like that we can't understand without going crazy. All of that was from Grimscribe, which is more supernatural. He takes like very real fears like that, the fear of knowledge, the fear of not living up to your potential, and he makes them very outside of the human realm. That collection of short stories is what is more like that. And then Songs of a Dead Dreamer, a lot of these were very human stories, which I found interesting. And one thing that I love about Ligotti specifically, that I should have probably said from the very beginning, he is incredible at giving you a sense of impending dread. It's a horror short story, so you know something bad is going to happen already. Typically in a horror short story. And he is able to capitalize on it in a way that I don't think I've ever seen, at least consistently, with other horror authors. He kind of leads you down a path and gives you hints at what's to come, and sometimes they mislead. Sometimes they, he's actually foreshadowing what's to come, but nonetheless, he kind of drops these little hints and breadcrumbs for you along the way that some people might miss, but the fact that they're just dropped in such a way that some might miss kind of makes it more horrific in a way that it would you can imagine it being so easily passed over. But when you start to think about it, it's horrific. Le Fleur is one example, I would say. where this guy he meets this girl named Daisy at a flower shop. Um, and he starts saying that he's like, oh, I tell everyone else that she's missing, but like I know what happened to her. Um,
Oh.
yeah. And it's I think the again, it's not what you think immediately, but it is still horrific, and he I think knowingly wants you to think what I'm sure everyone is thinking when I say, "Oh, I know what happened to my ex, who I tell everyone is missing." Um,
I can legit only think of one thing.
yeah, I know, but it's there's a supernatural aspect to a lot of these. Um, there's the frolic, which was the very first one, um, where there's this guy and he's moved out to this prison town in the middle of nowhere. He's a psychiatrist and he's thinking about quitting his job, not only because he can't get through to a lot of prisoners in general, but there's this one specific prisoner who is like a psychotic person, who has been connected with missing children cases. And then our main character, the psychiatrist, starts, they start talking about their kid, he starts talking about his kid with his wife. And
Oh.
then they go back to talking about this prisoner, and he talks about how, um, uh, it's like hopeless, and he talks about the things that really creep him out about the guy. And then he gets this funny feeling, feels like a draft or something, and he goes upstairs to check on his daughter, who's supposed to be asleep. And there she is with her little Bambi stuffed toy. And then he comes downstairs and he's like, "Oh, when'd you get that Bambi?" And the wife is like, "What are you talking about?" Like, and he's like, "The Bambi stuffed animal. Did you said you like guys went out today? Did you like buy it today for her?" She's like, "No, I didn't buy her anything like that today." And he runs back upstairs, and all that's left is a note about the frolic
Oh.
that his daughter has gone on.
Spooky.
Yeah. Um, he has this. I feel like I'm just going over the stories at this point, but like the point is that Ligotti he takes these like he takes this supernatural aspect that he himself doesn't believe in any way. In fact, he so strongly and vehemently believes that it doesn't exist. Um, and he fills in that space with the very real fears, that we humans have. He fills in that space with our traumas and, just the random assorted fears, societal or otherwise, personal fears, um, the fear of that prisoner, that somehow they're gonna get out of this maximum security prison and come get us, because there's like something supernaturally evil about them, even though they're in our world just a horrible person, um,
Hmm.
possibly sick in some way. There's nothing like supernaturally evil about them. They're just psychotic people. Um, but he really he takes that and he fills in the empty space that he personally believes is there with something even more horrific, that kind of gets at the heart of the things that we're afraid of. Um, and because he's doing that, I think that is another part of why he's able to fill in that dread so well, because he so masterfully goes after the things that give us pause in real life, in our worst moments where we're thinking about something and our heart drops for a second, or we freeze. because we're lost in thought about something that actually scared us for a moment. Um, yeah, and I think when it is all said and done, I think quality wise, he belongs on Mount Rushmore, and I hope that when it's all said and done, influence and reach wise, he will be up there as well.
That does entice me a bit because it feels like he's an amalgamation of all your favorite authors on that little pedestal.
Yeah.
There's Kafka, there's a little bit of Lovecraft in there. I mean, no, it's like Lovecraft and Kafka combined
Hmm.
to horror.
In some stories, and I think that's also another thing that's really great about him is that he has these supernatural aspects. He has the cosmic horror. He has the psychosis. He has like um, the Kafka-esque stories. There's another one that kind of was Kafka-esque in a way where the main character is like in a movie theater and everyone is entranced by this film, and then the theater itself is connected to some kind of being that's like it has hairs all over the place that are like holding them, like pulling them into their seats and holding them. And it wasn't like that scary of a story, but it definitely reminded me of Kafka somewhat. Um, and then he also does like again the cosmic horror. He does there's psychological horror stories. Um, he just does everything so well, and there's always he has some duds for sure, but there's almost always some interesting aspect that his worldview kind of helps him feed into it. Um, and it's not problematic in the way that Lovecraft's worldview seeping into his stories is.
You can now officially say this is your favorite horror author, without raising an eyebrow or anything like that. So, congrats.
Yeah. Yep. I can. um, I normally just say like cosmic. Oh, I love cosmic horror, but yeah, now I could actually point to an author who isn't Lovecraft.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that I don't have anything else to add. I'll definitely read up on him and I'll read his stories and everything because you do make it sound very interesting. I just I love it when horror is kind of just like representative of something that's not grief or trauma because that's kind of been overdone already. But just worldviews, and especially infusing a bit of Kafka into that. I think that's just very interesting. Especially making it seem normal but a little bit off kilter.
Yeah,
Piques my interest.
and his stories are more accessible than they've ever been because apparently I was reading up about him. A lot of them were out of print for a while, but
Oh,
Penguin printed an anthology with Songs of a Dead Dreamer and Grimscribe in it, so you can read both of those in a nice Penguin Classics edition.
oh, that's
Which
nice.
the fact that he has a Penguin Classics means that he is getting some recognition already.
Recognition. There's
Um,
hope.
yeah,
Yep.
he's gonna get there, I
Yeah, how
believe.
did you find out about this guy? Out of curiosity.
It was back when we did abstract horror. I was
Oh.
like scouring the internet for different abstract horror, and I liked the look of Ligotti. I liked some of the stuff that people were saying about him, but I was trying to go even further out there, and Ligotti
Mm.
reminded me of based on the descriptions I was seeing from other people. It was like, oh, he's like Lovecraft. Oh, he's like Kafka, and I was like, that is weird. That is abstract horror. It's weird fiction for sure. But I was trying to really go out there that month, and I did. I would say the cipher is definitely weirder and more abstract than most of Ligotti's stories, but I'm glad I got to come back around to him.
Well, that's what this book club is all about. Finding books that you may not have read in the first place. So, hooray! Because this book club has documented Pierce's fall in reading and then his rise once he started reading Kafka again. Bam.
All right. Is that's about it?
Yeah. Congrats on making through this episode alive. Hopefully, we didn't scare you too much.
Didn't get too scared, did you?
Yeah. Because there's another month of a topic that I've always been interested in. That topic being Raymond Chandler, who wrote a lot of noir, but since we're both reading books that are by Raymond Chandler, we're gonna stick to Raymond Chandler this time.
Yep. Which he is kind of the name in noir, so
Tomato, tomato.
yeah. Well, join us next month for some noir in the form of Raymond Chandler. And yeah, please give us a like if you enjoyed, a follow, a rating, subscribe, whatever it is. We appreciate it. You can find us on X, Twitter, and TikTok at Not Just Any Pod.
But YouTube is where we're going to be uploading a lot of content.
Yes, YouTube. In the coming months, we will start uploading more content besides just the podcast episodes on there. If you want to check us out on YouTube for either the podcast episodes or the new content, go ahead and find us. Not just any book club on there.
And we may shift a lot of the TikTok content onto YouTube because, again, we don't know if TikTok's going to exist in a couple of years.
It's still very possible that it gets banned in the coming months, even. So we shall see.
Yeah. And join us next month for us watching the movie Double Indemnity, which I am very excited about because it is one of my favorite movies ever. And I can't wait to introduce that to Pierce. I am also reading the book for that, not as my official book for the month, but as I say, the movie is even better. So that's exciting.
Yeah.
And aside from that, look out for the video that is going to be called Goodbye Prometheus.
Okay.